This is the House of Nerds show, and we're presenting our State of X for X-Men, all X talk stuff, extreme. Sure, X.
We all do that?
Do it. Why not? Yeah. We're talking X-Men. The article that was released mentioned that he's no longer going to be writing for the Marvel Mutants after Inferno for at least a while. But it hasn't been mentioned whether or not he's going to stay on as the head of X and the overseer of all that stuff. There was some plans to go into what he referred to as Act 2, and every other writer agreed that they didn't feel the need to do that just yet. They wanted to hold off on that three act structure of his because they still want to play around in Act 1. So with me talking about all things X-Men, we've got Lauren over here, and we've got from, you want to just, is it Let's Go?
Steve, yes,
Let's Go
podcast. You owe them an apology.
That's okay.
We'll do another apology. We already apologized on Sunday. That was a Nerd Show live. We already apologized there.
Personally,
I know we're gonna apologize this Sunday too.
You guys are fine.
What are some of your thoughts? I mean, Steve just gave us a bunch, but what are some of your thoughts on Hickman leaving the X office for the most part?
You know, I think, first of all, Hickman is a fantastic writer. I think there's no denying that. But I also think that he put a lot into this universe. Mm-hmm. He picked it up out of the ground, basically, and restarted for all the fans. And he's done something great. But at the same time, I think some of this stuff is really just ran on too long. Because I think that keeping them basically trapped on Krakoa this long is not been the best for them. That said, we've had some great stories, though.
So you see Krakoa as not a good thing. Like, it almost sounds like you would like to see Krakoa get shaken up and breaken up.
Mm-hmm. I would, and that's why I know we'll get into it, but I'm really excited to see what Way of X does.
Mm-hmm.
And the new X-Men book. You know, the new, I think we're on issue 2 now, is it?
Yeah, I think two just came out for that.
What book?
Just the Jerry Duggan X-Men, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the implications that's going to have, and also what Way of X is going to, the after effect of what we saw there.
So why do you think Krakoa needs to be shaken up? Because I know a lot of people, including me a little bit, we're like, hey, we don't want the Krakoan era ending anytime soon. Like, we're enjoying it. Why do you want it to kind of move on a bit?
Well, I don't need it to go away, really, but I would like to see some changes. I want the X-Men to do X-Men stuff. Right now, when Xavier's sitting across the table from Sinister and they're sharing a beer, that doesn't work for me. I can't get behind that.
You're not about second chances?
Sinister's had like third, fourth, maybe 6 chances at this point.
I mean, and if you're reading Hellions right now, like, he really does not deserve any more chances. Like, he really don't.
No, even if you go back to Powers of X #1, he doesn't deserve chances.
Yeah. I mean, he's still working towards that Chimera stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like that book that we read last week with Second Chances, and that line of, you only get a second chance. There are no third chances. It's like, no more.
But with Sinister cloning himself so many times, I mean, each iteration really is only getting a second chance until they die.
Well, that's true, though. That's a good point.
So his 30 chances are really 2 chances per Sinister life?
Just make another one.
So,
exactly, yeah.
So, Chris, with Hickman leaving the X office, do you think that means that they're more likely to get off Krakoa a bit more, at least, in terms of stories getting off that?
I think so, because Krakoa is Hickman's baby, and I don't think you want to mess with someone else's creation like that. So I do see them kind of venturing off Krakoa now. Now, whether that's a good thing or not, we'll see, because, like I said, Hickman did something very specific here. He pulled the X-Men out of the ashes, if you will, and now they're being thrown back into the fire without him kind of being the godfather of it all. So we'll see where this goes, but I'm still excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about that stuff. That's a good point. And I mean, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with the X office, because I wonder if they're going to have somebody kind of taking on Hickman's role, not necessarily in controlling the entire narrative of the X lines, basically, but in terms of being some guide, some leader saying, this is what we're doing now, guys. Because to my knowledge, nobody's been named to replace Hickman. So all the writers are kind of just having to work together somehow with no one really headlining it. So I guess that concerns me in general with the X-Men storytelling, because I don't know, like I don't trust all the writers separately to do their thing without a united vision at least. You know, that's what's made this work.
So I hope that I believe the X-Men editor is Jordan White, and I hope because all of the writers know of Hickman's 3-act structure and the whole big plot that he had planned for this whole thing, my hope on that is the writers can go do everything that they want. They don't want to get out of Act 1 just yet, but at a certain point, what I'm hoping happens is they're all going to decide, okay, it's time to move on. Let's bring Hickman back in. Let's set up his Act 2, big new revelation of what Krakoa is now, or what's going on for Hickman's, big thing. Play around with that for a little bit. Hickman goes away. Hickman comes back for the, Act 3 big stuff. I'm hoping at least the way that the writers then move with these stories still allows Hickman to come back and do his acts for this greater story. Because like you said, Chris, Hickman works really well with these long form stories. And he's planted so many seeds that he needs to come back, and there needs to be a payoff for them. Otherwise, like you said, we're just spinning our wheels in Act 1 forever.
So do y'all think that Hickman will ever come back on as like the main writer, like in charge of everything again? Or do you think he might only come back for like a big event or something that he might write on, or kind of mainstream, but then he's not going to actually commit back to the X office long term again?
Chris, what are your thoughts?
That's a tough one, because I think it depends on what Substack does for these writers, because he's not the only big writer who's jumping ship there. I mean, if they're happy at Substack, you got Tynan there, Zdarsky's going, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other popular names, but if they're treated well there, I don't see them going back to these publishers saying, yeah, you know what? I do want to finish my 10-issue arc or phase 2 or phase 3, especially when, in my opinion, the best guy to run the show after Hickman is Benjamin Percy. I think you stick him in charge, kind of like the overall guy who's going to dictate things, and you got something going still.
That's really interesting, because Percy's done a really good job in terms of his X stories with X-Force. I haven't read his Wolverine stuff, but his X-Force stuff has been solid at kind of keeping everything connected. Even initially when it started, like there's that initial, the assassination of Xavier, that whole thing happened and it connected everywhere in all of those other issues. And it felt like there's this cohesion within, the X titles, that maybe it's because Hickman's gone away, but at this point, I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel like that cohesion's entirely there anymore. Lauren, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, that's an interesting point. Honestly, I don't have a strong opinion on who should take over as like leading the X office or guiding them and kind of more the Hickman role. I don't really have an opinion, because it's hard to think of somebody who has that grand a vision. I mean, you have all these great writers and they all have great visions in a lot of ways, but is it something that's that large like Hickman's? And I mean, I do agree with Chris, though. I mean, if he's happy at Substack and these art creators are, why is he going to come back full time for the X office? Yeah. I think if anything, he'll come back for a grand event or two, because it is his baby. He probably will not want to leave it forever, even if Substack's better, but he'll come back every once in a while to get a paycheck from Marvel, do his grand event, and then he'll go right back to Substack. Yeah. Because he has the ability to do that. Like, he's such a big name. Why should he just be like, oh, I should go back to X office? If he doesn't need to, why the hell should he, As much as he wants.
I can definitely see that happening. And it's just because of the fact that this story that they've set up, I don't think it works without an ending. Like, they've set it up in House of X and Powers of 10. And in those 12 issues, the whole, Moira and the whole Destiny thing, right? Where Moira could potentially have an 11th life. That's the big thing. She could have it. But her getting that 11th life means a reset happening. And I don't think you titillate that kind of story to your fans without having it pay off. Like, that's the Chekhov's gun. That's the quote that will wrap it all up and do the reboot once it's over.
I agree. And that's what's interesting to me. So that they chose the event Inferno, like that title and all that, because that the way it could go, and that everybody's joking about and possibly taken seriously, is what if Krakoa does get burned to the ground or something does get burned? How is that going to look? Is it going to be that Destiny comes back and she reveals everything to everyone about Moira, about everything? Is it going to be that Moira burns everything down to avoid that, or something else? Or, everybody's talking about Mystique, of course, too. And, what if Magneto burns to the ground? What if Xavier does for Moira? Who knows? Like, I don't know. And what do you guys think makes the most sense to you, at least logically, to happen during this Inferno event, if it's not the final act of this Krakoan era?
I mean, the weird part is we're talking about it, and like there's such a big impact that Inferno feels like it's going to have. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, that article just told me the writers still want to be in first act. This is still act one. So like the fall of Krakoa that could happen, any of that stuff that could happen, in terms of Hickman's big plan, we're still in the beginning of it. So like Krakoa even falling, in my head, I'm like, where the fuck else could this even go if Krakoa possibly falling is happening within the first third of this big grand thing, right? And it could fall. But still, it's like, what else is going on then?
Yeah, what else does Chris? I mean, what do you think? I mean, you're the one that actually wants to see movement out of Krakoa in particular and stuff. Like, what are you wanting or hypothesizing or anything?
Well, my guess is it's not gonna be like the move to phase 2 of this. I see this more as like an X of Swords type event where some big things happen, but the status quo is the same. Mm-hmm. What I'm actually thinking is going to happen is this is where we start to see the group splinter off a little bit, because these characters can't live in paradise together. It just doesn't work. It's not going to sustain itself. So I think Inferno, you might see Krakoa damaged, but more so it's going to be about the characters, not so much as, we don't have Krakoa anymore. I think you're going to see them split.
So is this something like, I can totally see like distrust happening and splintering things because of the fact that potentially this is where Moira is outed. Potentially this is where everyone goes, Moira's supposed to be dead. Why is she here? How does she know the both of you? What the fuck is going on? And I'm wondering if Inferno's the idea where people then kind of get the sense of all of this shit's happening behind our back, and it starts to splinter things. But again, if that's still the case, we're in Act 1. So,
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what you said, Chris, but the wording I think different in terms of, or at least what I'd like to see the status quo changed a bit, but not necessarily in the way like Krakoa is destroyed or lost or anything. Like, let's say somehow, like my big thing is, a lot of people are focusing on Mystique, and I'm one of those people. And what if she finds a way to get Destiny back, and Destiny comes in and she gets some Moira and she like runs Krakoa? Like, what if Destiny and these other people like Mystique, and let's say Havoc comes in, he's pissed off, he can't get Madeline Pryor back. People forget about that. And then you have the whole thing with Gabby and the New Mutants, all these people that are dead and they should be able to come back, but because of BS laws that people higher up that think they're better than every other mutant for whatever reason have decided, these people can't get their loved ones back. And that's screwed up. And so I would like to see a switch in that. I would like to see Xavier and Magneto and Moira and all these people thrown off. And I want to see like maybe even like the villains or the people that don't believe in this status quo and realize it's wrong take over. And I want to see what happens when they take over Krakoa, because they probably will take it over and think, oh, we can run this way better than them. And then eventually in the second act, they realize, oh shit, we can't, because like you said, Chris, a paradise where you all live in harmony like that, it's not sustainable. Utopia is not sustainable. And they're going to have to learn that the hard way, So I'd like to see that shit. Like, I want to see it flipped. I want to see what happens when the villains or the people that aren't like Regal Storm or Precious Jean Grey or Xavier or Magneto or Apocalypse, when they don't get to run shit, when they have to listen to others. Like, I would love that.
That would also, the Toad Revolution.
Yeah, that would also work really good, because the whole Powers of 10 thing focused on the fact that Moira had all these different lives, and in all of those lives, she was involved in everything. And what happens if in this 10th life of hers, where she's trying to control everything, she's trying to make sure everything is working as her planned, and she's just removed from the equation altogether. She's not involved anymore in mutants.
Right. And imagine when the table's flipped in terms of I mean, it's also just astronomical to me because House of X Powers of 10 really changed the framework for Moira as a character, right? It made her become like this small character that some people really loved and some people didn't give a shit about. And it made her huge. It made her this big centerpiece in the X-Men world all of a sudden. Imagine if they did that for someone like Destiny, where she becomes in and now she's had this seeing into the future power forever and nobody's ever taken her really seriously in the comics, like truly for storytelling. What if she becomes the one that knows everything? She's in control. I mean, what does that look like? You know, like it's just wild to me.
Or the opposite happens. Destiny doesn't come back. Mystique's taken off the board. Everything goes back to how it was for this Act 1, and everything is.
What's the point of Act 1 then, Steve?
I don't know. Like, but again, like, so far everything that's run has subverted our expectations. You know, X-Men leading up to this, you know, I call it the extinction era, going from 2000 Morrison's run all the way to ending with Matthew Rosenberg. I really call that the extinction era because genocide was everywhere. They were endangered. They were extinct. The mutants were less than 300 of them left and all that stuff. And then Krakoa comes along and now we're back, right? So everything of this run so far has been subverting our expectations. We feel like this other shoe's going to drop, and Inferno makes us feel that way too. Just like, House of X did, just like Powers of 10, just like Ten of Swords. All of these events happen and they make us feel, because we've been told the last 20 years, something's going to happen with these mutants. And we're expecting this other shoe to drop. What if Inferno just happens like all the other events? We're expecting expecting something big to happen and for a fallout to happen. And I'm not like Chris, you might be right. I can totally see Inferno setting something big up, and then Mystique gets caught. She's out of the game. Destiny, not brought back. She's out of the game. Status quo, maybe some other things are revealed in terms of Sinister stuff or stuff like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if things are status quo for a bit, because all the writers want this.
I mean, I think it could be one of those things where they mark it as a big event and then it's like a lot smaller than we think for sure. But at the same time, I don't think you can just take Mystique out and everything's done in that storyline, because again, you have Mystique fighting to get Destiny back. You have Havoc fighting to get Madeline Pryor back. Now you have Gabby and people are fighting to get. You have all these people that have similar storylines and completely different bugs. And if you don't think about it, you don't realize how all these things go together, because everybody focuses on Mystique because that's been the main line and everything. Yeah. And Destiny is so important. But why does nobody care about the fact that Havoc, good boy Havoc, is wanting to fight back so hard against the status quo now because he can't get the one he loves back? Why is nobody caring that Gabby is dead, to my knowledge, and Laura is going to want to fight back? She's on the main X-Men squad. She's a main X-Men. She's a centerpiece and representation to Earth now as well. What happens when they deny Gabby's resurrection and she says, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
No. And you have somebody that huge just going to fight back. You have all these pieces lining up. I think there will be some pushback. I don't know how big it'll be, but there's no way that you can just be like, oh, well, Mystique did get caught. That's it. This isn't just about Mystique. As much as I love the storyline with her, there's so many other pieces that have to get addressed. Now, they could not address them and they could disappoint me, but I hope they don't.
I think this is my biggest fear with finding out that all the writers want to stay in Act 1 and that Hickman's, going away for a bit. My biggest fear is the fact that, yeah, a lot of these fun ideas are now happening, but is there a point to them when, like what Chris just said, when nothing really comes of it? I've got this big fear. After reading that article, I've got this big fear on the state of X, because it's like, is stuff actually going to be moving? Or does it just appear like it's moving? Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think, you look to the other events that have gone on so far since Hickman has taken over, and that's what it's been. We spin our wheels, something big is happening, but nothing comes of it, except maybe minor differences. And I really do feel like, especially with Steve, Steve mentioned that article, that kind of solidifies this is not going to be the big event that we're hoping for. Or, I hope that it does do something, but I just don't feel like it will. They're happy where they're at. Hickman's leaving for a bit. We don't know if he's coming back. And just looking at the other events, like, if you think about what came out of X of Swords,
Araco mutants, they decided to work together.
X of Swords was an event, but it wasn't something that was listed as the, like the build up to the end of Act 1, which is that's what I interpreted from that article. I've read the similar article, Steve. This is the end of Act 1. They're ending Act 1 now because Hickman wanted to jump all the way to go to Act 3, and they said, no, we're going to slow it down. We're going to do this and this and this. And so I do think this will be bigger than X of Swords. I don't think it'll be ginormous, but I liked what you said, Chris, in terms of like, you're not sure what impact this will have because a lot of X-Men fans, I know, haven't been reading Way of X. And if you haven't been reading Way of X, then you probably don't realize that there's a lot more bigger things happening than you think, particularly with that last issue of Way of X number 5, where there are some huge moments, not only for Nightcrawler, but some huge revelations for Krakoa and what's going to happen, possibly in Inferno and in the future down the line. So I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts in terms of if you think about just that last issue of Way of X, how do you think that could play into Inferno? Because it happened for a reason. It was a mini series. That was the last issue. It's kicking right off before Inferno. How could that possibly play into that event?
I personally don't think it will. I think in the beginning there were those 6 books, and there was an emphasis to keep them all connected. Like, Benjamin Percy's X-Force, the whole Xavier dying, that was a big revelation, and it affected all of the other books. Every book had a mention of that. But since we've grown from those 6 original books, less and less of the books are talking with one another. Less and less of the books are feeling like they're connecting to everything else. That whole Way of X thing, as much as I want it to have as much of an impact as the first 6 books did, I don't think it will. I think right now, and again, this is my fear of what's going on with the X things. My fear is each writer wants to do their own thing. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of these X books talking to one another, referencing one another. And I don't think we're going to see as much of an emphasis on togetherness and cohesion as we did in the beginning. I want the Way of X to pan out. I want it to affect so much. I want it to be this big thing because it's supposed to be. What happened at the end of Way of X is a huge moment. But the fact that they're now going to be doing a one-shot next month and that potentially could wrap it all up, that tells me those other books aren't going to be involved. That tells me it's not going to have as big of an impact on Krakoa at large as it really should.
What are your thoughts, Chris?
I don't know. I agree and I disagree with Steve. I agree that the books, as they kept going, we're kind of entering that phase of X-Men that we had before, where we just had all these books with all these characters doing their own things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think Way of X is a little bit more important than that. Even if we don't see the effect of it in Inferno, I feel like there was enough important stuff that happened in that book. Not just the final issue, which is beautiful, by the way. If you haven't read it, you have to. But just the whole, even though I didn't love the story, there was a lot going on there. There was a lot being set up there with kind of like a mutant, I guess a religion is what he called it, but to me it's more like a mutant law sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there was a lot being set up there, and a lot of Nightcrawler and David trying to figure out what is going to make the mutants tick going forward. And then you have that final bit of it where Nightcrawler just establishes dominance. And I don't think that's going to just end. I think there's more to it. And the one shot, I believe, is just going to kind of wrap it up in a nice little bow until we're ready to revisit it, which may be after Inferno.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your point with that, Steve, with just the one shot and then wrapping it up. I'm hoping they don't do that. I think the one shot is just to wrap up the Onslaught part of it, like him being the main villain and Kurt has to fight him off.
Yeah.
But the whole point of Onslaught being a villain in the Way of X line, as you see in the last issue, which I think it's fair to spoil it because it's been about a week. So spoiler warning. But the whole thing is that Onslaught's infecting everybody. He's infecting all of Krakoa. Yeah. And taking him away now will not get rid of the effects he's already caused. It won't get rid of the impact and the damage he's already done to everybody and everything on Krakoa. And so I think that's going to be the big thing that Kurt's going to realize as well once he has to fight Onslaught, and they probably do defeat him and everything is, well, the effects are still there. How do we get out the poison he's left now? And I think that will carry over into future stuff, whether that's Inferno or future storylines. And I mean, Way of X is so important because it unites every single X-Men line together, and that his revelation is the protecting the sacred land. The land is the people. All of them are the land. And therefore that also means not only can you not harm or kill humans, you also shouldn't be doing it to each other and stuff like that. And there's a lot of mutants that will not get on board with that. I'm positive of that. That's going to cause a lot of issues already. I mean, with the trial Magneto, he's hurting people left and right, and they're trying to hurt him. And, you know, like, how can you justify that with your laws? And, I mean, I'm really excited to see, because the impact of it is going to carry over the philosophies that have been built up through Way of X, whether you liked every issue or not. It's going to impact all of Krakoa, and I think it's also put Nightcrawler as a centerpiece now. And I also think it would be interesting to see Nightcrawler's response if he ever found out and Mystique told him his mother, even though they're on weird terms, hey, by the way, I just want my wife back, and they won't let me have her back.
Yeah.
What? Nightcrawler on his moral compass, even though Mystique's everywhere and he wants to believe in Xavier and stuff, I think at that point, after all this, if Mystique told him that, he'd say, you're right, you should have her back. So that's also another piece building up to changing the status quo over time. So yeah, anyways, I'm very excited. Way of X is fantastic. I'm afraid to read it.
I'm glad you brought up Trial of Magneto. So did both of you end up reading that?
I haven't yet.
No?
I did.
Okay, so I won't spoil, but Lauren, I just want to get your thoughts and opinions on some of the writing of it, because I felt like, without spoiling, in Trial of Magneto #1, there were a lot of characters written, I would say, out of character, especially with what's been established in this Krakoa era. There's one specifically, and I think hopefully you know what I'm talking about. There's one specifically that behaved in a certain way that they haven't been written in since House of X #1. They have not been written to be like that in this current era. What are your thoughts on something like that? And I feel like that's part of the whole disconnect between the greater X titles now, is that writers are able to do whatever they want with these characters that may not impact these other titles.
So the Trial of Magneto, if you've read any interviews with Leo Williams, who's a writer of it, the Trial of Magneto is actually something that was supposed to happen as an X Factor storyline. And then the writers decided to cancel X Factor, and they told her, hey, but we still want to use that, and we want to use it as an event. I think the Trial of Magneto is a good example of an event just to be an event. Yeah. Like, Chris, you were kind of implying with Inferno. I think that's what Trial of Magneto is. It's an event just to be an event. They've put Wanda at the center of it because of the MCU and WandaVision this year. They always want the comics to, like, I think it's just a gimmick. I mean, I read it, and to be fair, I didn't really, like, delve that much into the characters and how they behaved in it, because I didn't expect much from it. I was just like, okay, things are happening. Okay, there's some action. Okay, cool, whatever. It was an enjoyable read in terms of moving things and action, but I can definitely see how characters were written out of character, possibly. And I think that's because the writer of X Factor, Leah Williams, was forced to just make it some big event out of nowhere. And it was, even though it was supposed to just be an X Factor and contained. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people that have read X Factor, I've seen them say it reads like it should have been an X Factor issue, but it was forced not to. I didn't have an issue with the writing of Trial of Magneto just because I didn't have any big expectations, to be fair. I expected it to be, I mean, to be fair, I almost didn't pick it up because I'm like, this is clearly a gimmick event. Like, what's really going to happen from this? Like, but I picked it up anyway. And because I have low expectations, I was like, this was chill. So.
Okay. Maybe I should have had that mindset going into it, because I felt like it should have some importance just because of the whole emphasis on Wanda being the great pretender and the potential stuff where maybe she could then get her mutant powers back or whatever could come out of that. But reading that first issue, it kind of reminded me of when Zdarsky did Fantastic Four plus X-Men. That was released at the time of the first 6 books, the 4-issue miniseries that delved into Franklin Richards and his stuff on Krakoa. By the end of that whole miniseries, it felt that same way that you're talking about right now, where it was just kind of like a cash grab. It was just kind of like it didn't really matter, didn't really shake things up. Characters were written out of character. Xavier and Magneto were written so out of character in those 4 issues that it felt so drastic compared to how they were written in, leading up to everything in terms of all the Krakoa stuff. And maybe that's the same for Trial of Magneto. Maybe it's something like that, where it's going to be like Fantastic Four / X-Men, and ultimately there is not going to be a big thing out of it. Characters are going to be written out of character, and in the grand scheme of things, it won't ultimately matter. Chris, what are your thoughts on stuff like that for Krakoa stuff, like the X-Men / Fantastic Four, like what potentially we could be seeing with Trial of Magneto?
I think that kind of stuff is just a waste, to be honest.
Yeah.
I understand what they're trying to do. They're, more books, more money, expand the story, add a new character. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. People don't. I forgot that those even existed till you mentioned them.
Yeah, I honestly didn't think about them until like right now when Lauren was talking about like books that are just released as cash grabs, and I'm like, oh yeah, we had a Franklin Richards book at the beginning of this thing, written by Zdarsky, and it ultimately led nowhere.
Right, it was just unnecessary, and people don't remember. People don't want it, so I don't like stuff like that. I think it's better just to tell cohesive stories or just contain stuff and go from there. I don't see the point of doing this, especially when there's so many books out there anyway.
Yeah.
Like Marvel, how many books do you want me to have?
So in terms of the X-Men titles, we're talking, even the solos, Cable, Wolverine, all of the stuff that's currently released, excluding Way of X, just because we've already discussed it. Chris, what would you say is the book that you feel people should have their eye on to follow what's going on with Krakoa? Or do you feel like which book is the one that will shake things up?
That's a tough one. I gotta go back to the main X-Men title. I like what they're doing, and I know Lauren and I have talked about this. It's an interesting concept, and I like seeing the different characters there. You have Wolverine, and it's Laura, which I love. Mm-hmm. Anytime you put Laura in a suit, I am there.
Yeah.
I like seeing. Right. I'm in for that. I don't care. I'm in. And then you have Cyclops and Jean, who probably don't need to be there, but cool. They're the parents. I like it, and I just like what that book is doing. And then I also think of anything Percy's writing. X-Force, and his Wolverine book may not shake the status quo, but it's fun. Like when he had that run with Dracula, that was good stuff. So I think going forward, I would say keep an eye on the main X-Men title specifically, and X-Force. Those are the two that I think matter the most. The rest of them are just kind of filler. Yeah. I mean, Hellions is just Sinister being Sinister with a new coat of paint.
It's just good fun. I can kind of agree with that. The problem I have right now is I love what Duggan's been doing with Marauders. Marauders has been one of my favorite X titles, but I don't know why his first 2 issues of X-Men are not anywhere near the caliber of what I've been getting from Marauders for him. And maybe I'm thinking Marauders now, and I read a comment online on, I think it was R Marvel, and someone mentioned that for them, Marauders was doing really, really good for them, and it kind of slowed down for them when they brought Kitty back, or when they brought Kate back. And since then, it hasn't really felt like Marauders has really been doing all that much, and it started making me think that's kind of accurate. Like, I was all for that. I was all for the cliffhanger. They brought Kate back, which was amazing. And then since that whole thing, there was the lead up to Hellfire Gala? Like, what's been going on with Marauders?
Well, so I don't disagree with the fact that Marauders had a stride for a while, and then it dipped a bit. But that wasn't because of Kate Pride. It only dipped maybe 5 or 6 issues ago for me, something like that. Before then, was still doing really good. It was my favorite X line until I read Hellions. And then it dipped for a bit, but this last issue, even though it wasn't the most wow, mind-blowing issue, the impact it's going to have in terms of, they made Tempo a character in it again, which is huge based on the fact she lost the poll, but they still want to do something with her. The fact that now Emma and Kate and all these people have to deal with the repercussions of the Hellfire Gala, and the fact that humans are pissed at them and they're not getting their supplies. They're having to deal with all these things that are mundane, but this could contribute to Krakoa going up in flames in a way, even if it doesn't completely burn down. This can be the whole one thing collapses in Krakoa. You have the society aspect crash. You have the business stuff crash. You have this crash. You have the X-Men screw up in the human world on Earth now. And that crashes. That makes the mutants look bad. You could have all these things break down. And we saw that in the last Marauders issue where Emma's having to clean stuff up, even though she's Emma. She has her stuff together. What the heck? And I think Marauders has been dipping for a while, but I think it's becoming more important to watch in terms of how quickly Krakoa is going to crash and in what way it might crash somehow. And I think the X-Men line you have to watch because the main X-Men line, like, of course they're going to do something there, but I've been unimpressed with the writing. Yeah. Like, I'm not impressed with how they're writing Laura even. Like, it's not like they're doing terrible for her, but, like, she's just there throwing claws around and that's it. Like, do more with her. I mean, even do a bit more with Sync. Scott and Jean don't need to be there after the 5th or 6th issue. Let Polaris lead the team and then train Laura to become a leader. And like 30 issues from now, like let her grow as a character. I think if they do stuff like that, X-Men will do better. And that's why you should watch it. But if Scott and Jean are going to lead the X-Men team forever, that's a waste. We've had that for how many decades now? They can do things. They can do other things. That's what they should do as legacy characters and big ones at that. But I think Marauders people should read. I think you should watch X-Men whether you are enjoying it or not because they're going to do stuff in the main line. And then I actually think Hellions you should watch because it's the underdog of the X-Men titles. It's easily the biggest underdog. It's like Legends of Tomorrow in the Arrowverse. But it's going to have, I think that's where we are also going to see some buildup with the Sinister stuff, with Havoc, by the way, who I think is a bigger piece than people want to realize, and Madeline Pryor coming back again somehow. Like, I think you need to watch that because that's going to flow into. I also just don't read X-Force or Wolverine, so I don't know what's happening there.
X-Force has been pretty good, but again, it feels like, I don't know what it is, but all these books right now feel like they're stalling a bit. Maybe it's because of Inferno, but I like X-Force for what they're doing with Beast because Beast is right off his fucking rocker, and I love him essentially evolving into like a dark Beast because he's doing whatever it takes and whatever he sees. He sees as a threat. He is an asshole in this book, like straight up. He admits to it. Like he admits.
People literally, we all joke, but we all basically know it's true. Like he's basically a villain now. Like straight up. Yeah. Sinister would probably have a great time together. Like imagine a book where they start hanging out and they're like, oh yeah, let's do our plans together. Do you know how much? Oh, that'd be so bad.
I don't want to see that.
So
exactly, it's that bad.
I don't want to see that.
So you mentioned Hellions being the underdog, and I feel like there's a lot of talk on Hellions lately. I don't think that's the underdog anymore. I think there's a new underdog, and I don't think it's going to be anywhere. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and it's X-Corp.
Oh, yeah.
That's a book that's 4 issues in, and it started during, second issue was the Hellfire Gala issue, which not a good start because you're starting off in a crossover. That's never easy. And there may be 3-4 issues in, maybe 4th issues coming up. And I don't know anything that's going on in that. I followed the first 2 issues, didn't pick up the 3rd. I feel like if there's any underdog in here, it's that book because no one's talking about it.
This is what I mean by underdog. A show that critically is liked, or a comic in this example, right? A comic that is critically pretty good. Lots of people enjoy it, but the mainstream audience doesn't talk about it. So X-Corp, nobody likes, to my knowledge. Literally nobody. So you can't be an underdog if nobody's rooting for you.
Fair.
You need to root for the underdog. So the people that like Hellions, like me and a lot of our people that read it, we all know it's a good book. And we're like, why aren't people that read the main X-Men title reading this? You should. Like, even like if you read the main X-Men title, I would tell you to read Hellions over Marauders, to be fair. And I enjoy Marauders. But I would say read Hellions because it's just so much more enjoyable every issue, guaranteed. There's only been like 1 or 2 issues that have been subpar to me out of its entire run so far, which is huge. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, X-Corp, everybody just hates it. Like, sorry, we're all boring you, X-Corp. Like, you need to stop.
The concept was cool, though. I just don't think I don't think it translates to a good story. But the concept is cool.
I think the interesting part of X-Corp is, what was it, a year and a half ago, it was supposed to come out, but it was supposed to come out with a completely different premise. And it was retooled to what it is now. So I do wonder what the original X-Corp thought process was going to be on that story, who the characters were, what kind of thing was going to have happen in it compared to what's happening now. Because like you said, Lauren, like what is really interesting that is going on in X-Corp? Like,
yeah, I mean, I've literally heard nothing good about it other than some people trying to defend and say, like, but it was a really cool concept, like you said. And it's like, oh, wow. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you're just like release the original X core cut. Like, give us the original.
Yeah. Is it the next Fallen Angels? Like, is it the next one where it's just gonna just gonna end in a couple issues because it doesn't have any traction?
I mean, honestly, they should cancel. Like, they should have canceled that in X Factor, to my understanding, but it's fine. So how much? I think the last overall thing to talk about with the X-Men and their status and mutants and all that is, how much longer do you personally think Krakoa 1 is going to last and 2 should last? This era. How much longer do you think?
Chris, I'll have you take that one first.
Well, I don't think Krakoa is actually going to go away. I just think it's going to change and adapt.
So you think Krakoa is going to last like another 10, 20 years in comics?
Yeah, I think Krakoa is here to stay for a long time. Whether I like it or not, I think it's here to stay. But the idea behind it, we're all going to live in harmony. Apocalypse is going to fist bump, Cyclops and all that. That's not going to stick around. But Krakoa as their home, yeah, I think that's going to stay. It's going to evolve. I think, right now it looks like basically like an ugly jungle with some huts on there. That's not going to be the same. I think we get like maybe, I personally would like to see it turn to like a Wakanda kind of situation.
Oh, like a city.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. These mutants have all these technology. They could bring each other back from the dead, and they're sleeping in huts. What is going on?
That's true.
I feel like that's a personal choice on their end.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe Hickman and them didn't think that far enough. Like, yeah, they can live on a giant plant island, basically, Krakoa is, right? But, they could be
their landlord or something.
They make all that medicine and make millions of dollars off of easily. Like, yeah, they could be having... skyscrapers and shit. Not that that's what they want, but they could. And Emma would want that. Come on, Emma Frost.
Magneto could build it for free. Just give him some metal, and he'll do what he's got to do. So
that is so interesting for you saying that, because Hickman's whole thing is about building this mutant society and the evolution of that and the growth of that. And there's the whole talk of resurrecting all these mutants that are in the backlog. And there's over 2 million mutants in the backlog from Morrison's E for Extinction, right? The whole genocide that took place. So damn it, if that could possibly be a second act thing, a fucking mutant city, cities of all of these mutants back, it's Krakoa being overpopulated at a certain point.
Well, I I feel like that was kind of the purpose of Arakko, and then we just watched that get
into a planet, right? Yeah. Send them onto the planet. Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so that's basically that is. So, it looks like they could, now they bring that up, they could be building to something like that, and so yeah, that could make it last longer for sure. But yeah, I would like to see more of a connect with humans, which is odd because we've seen that forever. But I want to see more connection between universes rather than just them on Krakoa or they're just in New York City like the X-Men are right now. You
know what it feels like? It feels like they're the new Inhumans. There's this society where they are and they're alone and humans are doing their thing, and the mutants are dealing their stuff, and all of the X books are focused on this one mutant society that's taking place, segregating themselves from the human population, which is exactly what the Inhumans did for almost all of their books until all new Inhumans, when Black Bolt did the whole Terrigen Mist, all that stuff happened. It feels like they've kind of swapped the roles now, and the mutants are now the new Inhumans.
Yeah, for sure. And with that said, how long do you think they will be the Inhumans, Steve?
If Hickman was still on this thing and it was entirely Hickman's thing, I would have said this maybe would last 5 years, because Hickman's really good at the long form storytelling, and he really wanted to push into that act 2 of his. Since there's been that pushback, and since he's now stepping away and all the writers want to play with all of these toys that he's created for them, I'm going with what Chris said. This is here to stay for at least 10 years. And I don't know how long they're going to be in whatever act structure of Hickman's grand plan. I don't know when they're going to move from act to act or when all that stuff's going to happen. I'm a little concerned because it already feels now where certain things are just spinning its tires. And I feel like this feeling isn't going to go away. I feel like this is like the next 10 years, or until there's that other act shakeup or whatever, when Hickman does what he needs to for this big saga to keep going. Because that's what it is. Like, there has to be an ending to this, because it's all set up for this ending. And it's going to be 10 years. They're at least going to have 10 years. It's been at least a couple now. And all of these writers seem really intent on continuing to explore these new ideas that Krakoa set up. I think we're looking at, we had Morrison start in like 2000, and it finally just ended a couple years ago. At least 10 years for this.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with both of you, and I see the pros and cons to it. I think the writers in Marvel see how well this Krakoa era is doing for X-Men. It's doing incredibly well. It's critically acclaimed. The numbers are showing. And I think that's why not only did the writers, but the editors and such, they wanted to stay in Act 1, and they want to make this last.
Yeah.
They tried out with Hickman. Hickman pitched it to be a lot quicker. And then once it worked, they said, oh my God, Hickman, like, suddenly we want to invest more in your idea. Like, we're going to drag this out more than you originally planned, because this could actually last. And I think that's great, because I like the era. I'm not necessarily saying they have to stay on the island of Krakoa. That's all they do forever. I agree with you on that, Chris. But I like this basically new universe they've made for the X-Men.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's working. My concern is I don't want them to drag it out too long, kind of like a TV show that goes on an extra season that shouldn't. Like, if you find that organic point, you can end it, and you should end it. Do not drag it out for sales. End it properly, writing wise, please, God. Like, whenever that time comes, because if we have this great era that's amazing and all this is great, and then it ends in the worst way possible, this entire era, no matter how great everything else before that ending was, is going to become a joke because of that ending. And I think it's so important that we make sure it's not dragged out that long. So I hope the writers know what they're doing, and the editors, in terms of making it go longer than Hickman planned. Don't be stupid, please.
Yeah, this could be in TV analogy, this could be a Breaking Bad. But right now, the way I read that article, the way I'm seeing things, I'm fearing that it's going to be The Simpsons.
I was thinking Game of Thrones.
or that too. Ooh.
Or Supernatural goes on just like 10 seasons too long.
Yeah. That's my biggest fear, right? I'm afraid that is what is going to happen. And speaking of things going on too long, I think we should start to wrap up this State of X. Lauren, where can the good people find you on the interwebs?
Yep, you guys can follow me at friendlymBHDby on Twitter and Instagram. You know I'm here on the House Nerd channel on the show. You can follow our channel on at House of Nerd Show on Instagram and Twitter. We're cool now. We have Instagram, kids. But yeah, come bother us. If you want to talk more X-Men, come bother me. And if you want to scream about Nightcrawler with me, please do. He's on my walls. Like, I love the man. So
thanks, Lauren. And Chris, where can the good people find you?
Well, first, thank you guys for having me. This was a blast. Anytime I get to ramble about X-Men is always a good time for me. Everybody can find me on Twitter at DatChris70. You can find all this stuff I do at letsgopodcast.com.
Yes, definitely check out Let's Go. We're going to hope to have you on again, because I want to keep doing X-Men stuff, because Lauren and I love the X-Men, and I'd love to have more people have these talks, or maybe even join in on whatever we have planned for skits or whatever. Who knows what we have down the line? I have no idea.
I'll get my claws.
Yes. That being said, you can find me on Twitter at Stovepost. Find the House of Nerd Show on Twitter at House of Nerd Show. Don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, ding-a-ling that little bell, and be sure to come back to this channel every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, to watch the House of Nerd Show live with myself and Lauren and Sergio and whoever else is available to come join us for certain episodes.
And after our show, Father Chris and
Yes.
Emmett and whoever else they have on their show on the Let's Go podcast. Was that 9 p.m. Eastern, I believe, usually. Yeah. But follow their Twitter at Let's Go Podcast too, because sometimes they have to change. You know, life happens.
Yeah. What days does the Let's Go normally do their stuff?
Well, we do Let's Go Live kind of alternates between Saturday nights and Sunday nights. We're still kind of figuring out which night we like better. Some nights we like Sundays, though. I believe this week we're back on Sunday. It'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central.
Perfect. For all that and more, check out our Twitter, check out our YouTube, come check us all out, and obviously comment about X title stuff, because who doesn't love what's going on?